Hello, this is Active Love Adoptions in the state of Utah. I am Isaac Thomas. I'm the Chief Executive Director for Active Love, and I'm also a licensed clinical social worker. Active Love Adoptions is located in Sandy, Utah, outside of Salt Lake City. We are licensed by the state of Utah, and we are licensed as a child placing agency. We have been providing adoption services since 1993. Active Love is a full service agency providing services to both birth parents and adoptive families. Active Love Adoptions is a charitable, nonprofit 501c3 adoption agency. Let's begin with our first question. If you have any questions that you'd like to have answered, please write them in there and we'll have someone read them out to me and I will answer your questions. If you're looking at this video in a replay, if you still have questions, please email those to us or on Facebook here, and as we have our next live chat, I will answer those questions. What I have to do to adopt a child. First of all, you have to look at finding a provider that you feel comfortable with and that can work with you. If you have a provider that is not willing to talk to you or provide you answers to your questions, you might want to look a little further, because if they don't have time for you, then they won't have time when you have other questions once you had a place with a child. You need to understand the adoption laws in your state. For each state has different laws and requirements to make sure that you can finalize the adoption in your state and can work with other states as well. You need to complete all of the necessary paperwork, and there is tons of paperwork. Tons. There's so many things that you have to fill out that you will be able to understand why some people do not follow through with an adoption plan, because they do not want to complete all the paperwork. You have to have an FBI criminal background screen check for abuse and criminal activity. You cannot be placed with a child for adoption if you have a felony offense. You would have to get that offense expunged or get the state to approve you through their office for adoption. You will have to have a completed home study completed by a licensed agency or social worker within the state in which you live in, and that home study would have to be notarized as well. You would have to make sure that you have the financial resources to adopt. Adoption is an expensive undertaking, and that would depend on the provider that you choose. The provider that you choose can be one of three. You can adopt through the state, you can use a private attorney, or you can use an agency. And each one of those has various costs and different costs that go with those. And they can sometimes reach to be very expensive. How do we find birth parents that want a place? Active Love advertises with several different Facebook ads, and we do internet postings, and we do internet advertising. We also use advertising in some yellow pages. Our biggest recruitment mechanism for birth parents and adoptive parents is word of mouth. We have several families that refer other families to us, or birth parents to us, and as well as we have some birth parents that refer their friends or family members to us that are looking to place a child for adoption. Right now we're working with about 42 adoptive families and approximately 20 birth parents. And that number ebbs and flows because as we have placements, we have another birth mom coming in, another family coming in. So it's kind of a moving target, and it's never as a static figure. What do I do in an open adoption? Now, do you have to do an open adoption? No, you do not. Adoptions takes various different forms as far as openness, and unfortunately that term openness is used, I believe, too universally. I think the term should be a continued contact after placement. Let me tell you why, because when people say openness, some people think it's completely open when it really isn't. There are several avenues you can take. Most birth parents in today's world want some form of continued communication. Rarely, if ever, do we ever have a truly closed adoption. Most birth parents want pictures and letters for a certain amount of time for the first year, and then yearly or twice a year thereafter until age 18. Now, the various forms of those contacts can be, they can exchange email addresses and communicate that way. Some have a blog post that they do, or they can work it through a private Facebook page. Also, they can do pictures and letters and send those through the agency, and then the agency will then forward those letters on to the birth parent. My advice to any adoptive family is, do not agree to any kind of continued communication that you're not willing to follow through with as you complete your adoption. If you're not willing to do the continued communication, it puts stress on the baby, the birth parents, and you, and the agency. You need to understand there are several states that have enacted laws regarding this area of continued communication, that if it isn't followed through by the adoptive family, that there are consequences. And what those states are, I do not know. But you might want to check with your state or the state that the child is going to be born in to see if they have such a law.
How do you manage the concept of paying for birth parents' expenses and just hope they don't have a change of heart?
Okay. Paying for birth parent expenses. With the Active Love Adoptions, paying for birth parents' expenses is done in two ways. It depends on which type you're talking about. There are a certain set of expenses that you pay along the way until the birth of the child. Once those expenses are used, you will not get those back. There are certain other expenses that are paid for her confinement, which is after the birth of the child. If she does not place, you do not lose that money, but you may lose the $4,000 or $5,000 of the upfront expenses that the birth mom is given to care for her until the child is born. One of the other things that has gone on is that some birth parents don't necessarily need expenses and don't want them. So you need to look at that, but be very careful to make sure the agency that you're working with understands how to make that work and how to make that happen. How long will I wait for a baby? Well, you will wait for a baby depending on how fast you get all your paperwork done, depending on the agency and how they choose to select families. At Active Love Adoptions, we do not have a waiting list. If you say you were approved for adoption this afternoon, I will start showing you to any birth parent that met your parameters right then and right there. And if you're selected, you're selected. We believe that the wait time depends on your parameters as far as what you will accept in the background history of the child and in the birth parent's behavior as far as drugs, alcohol and substances, mental illness and things like that. And what you are looking for in the ethnicity of the child can also make the wait for a baby longer. If you're looking to adopt a Caucasian child, that line goes around the block a couple of times at least. And if you're looking to adopt a mixed race child, that can be quicker, or a minority child. But it depends on you and what you will accept and the parameters that you put on what you're looking for in a birth situation. What is the cost of adoption? The cost of adoption is great. Like I said about the providers, with a state it may be a different cost. With an attorney it's a different cost. With an agency it is a different cost. For Active Love, our cost for our average runs from about $35,000 up to $240,000. It can be higher than that depending on the situation and the circumstances of the birth parent. There are grants out there that you can try to get and other funding sources. We do not know what those are, but you can find those out through the interval for some because you're not paying everything in one lump sum. Likewise, some agencies, if an adoption does not work or falls through, you lose all of your money. With Active Love, that is not true. Do your birth parents use drugs or some substances? No, all of our birth parents do not use drugs or substances. Some do. Some, when they find out they're pregnant, stop using those substances and things, and they move forward from that point on, drug-free, smoke-free, alcohol-free. There are others that do use those substances throughout their pregnancy, and we try to track those and help them through those types of things. We do interview our birth parents quite regularly about those issues, and we do understand that if a baby is born exposed, that they have been exposed to drugs, or if they've been born addicted where they have drugs on board. Being exposed is different than being addicted. I would advise you that if you are presented with situations where drugs, alcohol, or smoking or have been involved, that you consult your pediatrician about that particular case to see what he has to say about what he would recommend and what would be the outcome medically for that. We have birth parents give birth all over the United States and in Utah. About half of our births occur in Utah, and about half of our out-of-state birth moms come to Utah to have their babies. So we have babies all over. And you will have to be able to travel to the state in which your child is born in order to pick that child up. How many birth parents change their minds? We have less than 4% of birth parents changing their minds. It's a very unique thing because I've adopted 4 children, and I remember when I was waiting for my birth mother to relinquish my son, and I realized that she was doing something that I could not do. And then I started to understand it's very different to making a decision to place a child for adoption when the child is in utero as to when the child is present. That is the reason why some birth parents do not want to touch the baby, do not want to see the baby before they relinquish it, because they're afraid that they would bond instantly, and they don't want that to happen because they want to put the child in a better situation. Any other questions?
Not at this time.
Okay. I think that what we have done here is try to go over kind of rapidly some of the things that are involved in adoption. I know that there are many, many questions out there that need to be answered, and I would be happy to answer them for you. You can call Active Love Adoptions and talk to me or one of my staff, and we'd be happy to work with you and answer any questions you may have. But like I said in the beginning, if you're watching this video and you have a question that wasn't answered, please send your question through Facebook, and we'll answer that question and get it back to you at another live broadcast. I thank you for your time, and I appreciate you attending this meeting. Thank you. Bye-bye.